Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very grateful you are here. Welcome back. Taking your valuable time to be here together. Thank you. We preach it all the time. We did last year and we will continue to, about the importance of curating your inputs and the fact that you've chosen this show to be a part of your day and this network to be a part of your daily routine. Very grateful for that, and we will not waste your time. On today's show, I'll be honest, I've been kind of checked out for the last 2 weeks, so I need the latest on Georgia. The election is tomorrow, so I'm gonna get an update on that, and then we're gonna get an update on COVID. So again, I live here in San Diego. California, surely we are gonna be locked down until July. Like, there's no question about that. Especially because people are spooked about this new mutant strain. But if I've learned anything from our professor of virology at Columbia University, it's that this is nothing to be concerned about. This is a lot of media hype, so we'll get the latest from him coming up in the third segment today. But first, it is our first official show of the new year, so we have to do the obligatory New Year's resolution segment. If you want to keep your New Year's resolution this year, I have the answer for you. First thing is, do you want to keep it, I guess? You need to want to keep it before, right? And we all know how these go, right? We know the numbers. 90% of New Year's resolutions are broken within the first month. I don't know if that's true, I just made that up, but that sounds right. Like, in your experience, that's probably about right. Like, who keeps a New Year's resolution for the whole year? No one does. And the reason why is because people only focus on the outcome. What do I mean? Number one New Year's resolution is what, right? Lose weight. I'm going to lose weight this year. Okay. First of all, that's not specific enough. It's incredibly vague. So someone will say, hey, you need to be more specific. Okay. All right, fine. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. Great. That's outcome. Your resolution is to lose 20 pounds. That's outcome. Now, what's better than that is process. So a better resolution is, I'm gonna work out 5 days a week. And if I do that, I will end up losing 20 pounds, right? That's definitely better. Process is better. But it's not good enough. You gotta keep digging. This is a really advanced diagram from James Clear's book called Atomic Habits. Very advanced diagram. Only very intelligent people will be able to make. It's just a couple circles. But think of these three circles here. The outside circle is outcomes. Lose 20 pounds. The next inner circle is process, work out 5 days a week. But if you keep digging, you get into that middle, that inner circle. That is the identity circle. That's what you need to change. What kind of person do I want to be? What kind of person am I? What kind of person do I want to be? So in this instance, it would be, I am the type of person, and that's usually the formula, right? I am the type of person who doesn't miss a workout. I am a healthy eater. It's who I am. Hi, my name's Charlie, and exercise is a priority for me. That's who I am. Okay, well, what would a person who never misses a workout do right now? Probably not sit on the couch and have another piece of pie. They'd go work out. That would fulfill the process, and then the outcome will follow. Make sense? So that's the secret. You gotta dig down to your identity. One I hear all the time is, I am late. I am late. That's just who I am. That's an identity statement when someone says that, right? And they always do it as like, oh, well, I'm just late all the time. That's me. No, stop being that person. But instead of, you know what, I'm gonna show up on time. It's never gonna happen, right? That's your outcome-based resolution. So you say, okay, I'll set my clock 10 minutes ahead. That way I'll be on time. That's process. Still not gonna happen. You gotta change your identity. I'm the type of person who is always early to things. I am the type of person who always shows up first. I'm the type of person who respects people's time. I'm the type of person who doesn't stress when I'm driving to things. I'm the type of person who, when my friends text me, where are you? You say on the way and you haven't really even left your house. Or a person who doesn't do that thing. This is who I am now. So you literally think of the type of person you want to be, make your identity, and then prove it to yourself every day. So a common resolution would be, I'm going to write a book this year. No, you're not. It's never going to happen. You got to say, I'm a writer. I'm a writer. Well, what do writers do? Writers write a page a day. If you do that, you're going to end up writing a book this year. People say, I'm going to read more. No, you won't. You got to say, I'm a reader. Readers read books at night instead of watch Netflix. It's what readers do. And before you know it, you'll be reading a book a week. Change your identity, the process will then change, and then the outcome will follow. Make sense? So who am I? What type of person do I want to be? And then prove it to yourself every day. Cool? All right. Second point on our obligatory New Year first segment. As I said in the opening, curate your inputs. Everything you watch, everything you listen to affects what you think and therefore how you act. Everything you watch, everything you listen to tells you what's important in life. You subliminally or consciously rearrange your priorities, your identity, you act differently, your life is different. You have to be extremely particular about what you let into your life. So let's not do things in 2021 just because I've always done them this way. It's just what I do. No, this new year, ask why do I do these things? why have I been doing these things, and do I want to keep doing them? Because you're following something. You follow something. You follow advertisers. This is one of my New Year's resolutions, is to not be tricked by labeling. I know labeling at the grocery store and everything is such a trick. And I still get, I'll go and there's I gotta buy some olive oil. And you're like, oh, what's the best olive oil? I like this label the best. This is probably the best olive oil, right? It's like an idiot gets fooled by that stuff. And I do all the time, right? So you're tricked by advertisers constantly. You follow politicians. You follow the media. We're constantly being manipulated all day, nonstop. There are so many people and forces leading you and me astray. Who are you following? Because it's up to you, ultimately. Who you let follow you, or who you let lead you, is up to you. And most of the time, we don't even know who we're following. I want to read a poem here. It's written over 100 years ago by this guy, Sam Foss. I want to read it here. A reading in this new year. One day, through the primeval wood, a calf, a baby cow. So one day, a long time ago, a baby cow walked home, as good calves should, but made a trail all bent askew, a crooked trail, as calves will do. The trail was taken up the next day by a lone dog that passed that way. And then a wise bellwether sheep pursued the trail over vale and steep and drew the flock behind him too, as good bellwethers always do. You got it? So you got this woods, and you got this little baby cow who made a path, and it was a winding, crooked path because it's a dumb cow. And then the next day, a dog followed it, the next day a sheep, and then a whole flock of sheep. And from that day, over hill and glade, through those old woods, a path was made. And many men wound in and out and dodged and turned and bent about. But still they followed, do not laugh, the first migrations of that calf. The forest path became a lane that bent and turned again. This crooked lane became a road, with many a poor horse carrying a load. And thus a century and a half they trod the footsteps of that calf. The years passed on in swiftness fleet, the road became a village street. And then before men were aware, a city's crowded thoroughfare. And soon the central street was this, of a renowned metropolis. And men 2 centuries and a half trod in the footsteps of that calf. Each day 100,000 rout followed the zigzag calf about. And over this journey, this crooked journey went the traffic of a continent. 100,000 men were led by one calf near 3 centuries dead. There's one more stanza here, but you get the imagery here so far, right? And all these people think there was a reason why they were following this particular road. But it wasn't. It was some dumb cow 300 years ago who first went through, and now we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Last line. A moral stanza this might teach, were I ordained and called to preach. For men are prone to go it blind along the calf paths of the mind, and work away from sun to sun to do what other men have done. They follow on the beaten track and out and in and forth and back, and still their awkward course pursue just to keep the path that others do. They keep the path, the steady groove, along which all their lives they move. But how the wise old wood gods laugh, who saw the first primeval calf. So the wood gods were there. They see men today traveling these same roads, thinking these men, they're probably not thinking at all, but if they're thinking at all, they'll be like, oh, we do it this way for a good reason. And the wood gods who saw that first cow are just laughing at us. They're like, oh, you idiots. How many things today do we do that we don't even know why we do it? Our daily routines, our wants, our desires, our worries, the things we buy, the things we lust after. Who even said that this is a thing we should lust after? Like that this is an object, this should be an object of your lust. Who said that should? The things we do and don't even know why. How many things in our culture are being preached and lifted up as Lord that make no sense, that are bad and dumb and sinful and foolish and wasteful, and we just do it because, just because we do. It's the old line, if you don't believe in something, you'll fall for anything. So I'm a Christian. So I would argue that you should follow Jesus, but at least question what you've been following. Let's all start there and know that you do follow. Right? This is very prideful, American, well, I don't follow anyone. I'm my own man. No, you follow something. Question that in this new year. And again, rethink your identity. I'm the type of person who, and do something every day that proves that true to yourself. The rest will follow. All right, coming up next, we'll talk about Georgia, and then we'll get the latest with COVID and the mutant strains. Next, True Story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. So tomorrow is the election in Georgia. What in the world? So we got to get the latest. Scott Hounsel, our friend, he's the resident polling and data expert at Red State. What's up, Scott?
How you doing, man?
Good, man. Good to talk to you. So I'm not in Georgia, so I haven't been inundated. I'm sure the people of Georgia have been for the last 2-3 weeks with all this stuff. So bring me up to speed here. What's it looking like right now in Georgia?
Well, unfortunately, it doesn't look so very good for the Republicans down in Georgia. The polling coming out of Georgia shows that both Democrat candidates currently lead against their respective candidates. It doesn't surprise me too much with Ossoff because he's been doing so well. I call him the perennial millennial candidate because he always has been running for something, and he fits that millennial build. But I'm not too surprised in that regard regarding Purdue, but in the Loeffler race, Warnock having that lead is extremely surprising to me. I just don't see how he's doing so well considering the scandals we've seen of him. He doesn't seem to be one to fit that build.
I've been following this very casually, but didn't some video come out of his ex-wife with a police body cam?
Yeah.
Tell us the backstory with that.
I mean that to me, that was the craziest part about it was the fact that he got caught in such a blatant lie. He said that it was just a little misunderstanding, but there was credible, what appeared to be credible, and very real accusations of domestic violence. And in politics, that's one of those things that just doesn't fly. It doesn't. And the fact that he walked away almost Teflon from that is quite surprising to me.
Yeah, his I don't know who it was at the time, wife at the time, whoever said
his ex-wife.
He's a very good actor, meaning he's a bad guy, but he comes and goes, oh, what's going on? What's the problem? Whatever. So, but maybe you have to be in order to be
that's
a person
politics.
like him.
That's politics, and that's also in some ways, and sometimes some pastors. I mean, some religious
100%.
leaders. And so it's unfortunate, but in this case, we've got both a politician who happens to be a former or current, and I mean religious leader, and so he may have to put on a face sometimes that people want to see publicly that isn't who he actually is. And so we don't know how he is behind closed doors. We don't know what he's been doing or the way he acts on an intimate level, one way, with one person or another. So again, it's very surprising he walked away from that so well.
Wow. Okay, what do we know with numbers? What are we looking at polls? And then we'll talk about early voting, but what do you know of the polls?
So as far as polling is concerned, I've kind of turned off a lot of the polling after the election because of obviously still following it, but the way that they were so off, and then again, not admitting that they were off, or at least saying, this is what we got wrong. However, one of those outfits that I've always followed and felt that have been very reliable, Trafalgar, has both the Senate candidates, Republican Senate candidates, trailing anywhere between 2 and 3 points.
Amazing. Now I'm sure it's just, again, because of just massive, we won't talk about fraud, but massive voter turnout in the cities. Is that what's doing this?
Yeah, this is the same thing that happened in the general, is that they're going to go into the areas that they knew they were successful in and just turn them all out again. I don't think that they're going to have as high of turnout, but unfortunately, Trump has not done no favors in the state with the way he's been railing against the voter fraud that occurred in the state, or at least the alleged voter fraud. His phone call with Raffensperger being exposed or released this last week, which, by the way, like I said, isn't right, wasn't correct. It seems very wrong for him to have done that. But the fact is, I don't think that's going to do either Senate candidate any favors on election day.
What about, give us some numbers. What do we know about early voting and all that?
As far as early voting and everything is concerned, we can tell who turned out, but we can't tell how and what, like who they voted for, if that makes any sense. So it does seem to appear to be a Democrat advantage in early turnout. Not as sizable as it was in the primary, I should say, or not in the primary, in the general election in November. Primary for this race, though. So I don't really see how there is going to be any additional turnout that's going to really make a difference for Republicans. We could be blown away again, where they just overestimate how many Dems will actually turn up on election day. Trump not being on the top of ballot does hurt Dems, because that was their means of turning everyone out. And now that it's going to be potentially a Biden administration, that they're going to say, well, let's balance against that. Most of the time, midterms after a president-elect is elected will shift back to the party who lost the White House. So in this particular case, it may be an early sign of that as opposed to waiting fully till 2022.
Well, okay, well, that kind of sounded hopeful for the Republicans, the way you said that, right? That the Democrats may have an early voting lead, but not as big as the general. Isn't that good for the Republicans?
It is technically. I just don't know how good. And again, it's just about turnout. I will keep saying this, is that being a state that has a special election this close to a general election that happened to be with one of the most polarizing candidates on the ballot previously, I just don't see turnout being as high. I don't even see it being anywhere near what it was. If for whatever reason, and not to mention, I think the Republican brand is also damaged in Georgia as a result of some Georgia Republicans are just like, let it go, because of what they're watching the Republican leaders not fighting in some regards with the November general. So if there may be some Republicans that get out and say, we've had enough of Republicans in the state. They aren't fighting for us, so we're not going to fight for them.
Yeah. How close? So you mentioned Purdue, and what's the Democrat's name?
Yeah. John Ossoff.
Ossoff, yeah. So Purdue, did he didn't he win? Like, I remember the last I saw, he was at like 49.9%. He just was under the 50%. So didn't he get he got more votes than Ossoff, right? So how could Ossoff now win in the regular?
Because of the fact of who and what you're turning out in this particular election. So again, it's not that there is there's a difference necessarily with the general electorate feel. It's that whether or not those people will turn out and vote. I think that there's been enough damage, like I said, damage done between Trump and the Republicans in the state not fighting, that you're going to have enough Democrats show up because they're still fighting Trump, quote unquote, versus the Republicans not showing up because they're fed up with with the Republican leadership in the state not doing enough to fight the election. So again, it's a depressed Republican turnout, increased Democrat turnout. I don't think Democrat turnout will be as high, but I also think Republican turnout will be that much more depressed as a result of Trump and the Republican leadership in the state.
Crazy. Okay. How was voting done for the special election? Did they have mail-in voting just the same as they did?
Yes. Every election is conducted the same way. There'll be just as many mail ballots. There may be, depending upon certain counties, there may be certain counties that'll have fewer polling places available because it is a special, not a general election. So there may be some compressed voting with certain precincts. There may have been 3 polling places previously where there may have only been 1. But I don't see that happening anywhere but in rural areas, not in the inner city areas where Democrats are in control. They'll have as many polling places available because they'll want the advantage.
Yeah, I wonder what the Republican Party's been doing there to increase the turnout and get out the vote, because the Democrats are going as hard as they did in the general, knocking on doors, et cetera.
Of course. And I think that Republicans will be fighting that aspect of it, but I think that there's a difference, and this is something I've been advocating for years within the Republican Party, is we've got to start fighting fire with fire. Stop complaining about them using these tactics, ballot harvesting and GOTV efforts and all the rest of it. Start fighting fire with fire, and we should start doing those things. We should start driving people to the polls with some sort of ballot harvesting operations and that sort of thing. But we instead try to level the playing field by preventing Democrats from doing so. So I think that we need to start looking at efforts of how we can do these things as opposed to just trying to fight Democrats' ability to do these things.
Yep, agreed. All right, obviously, what's a prediction worth, right? And we won't hold you to it, but what do you see?
I actually think that there's a potential of a split here. I think that one may win and one may lose.
How could that even be? Because who would vote? Who would vote for one Democrat and one Republican?
It's a question of who shows up to bullet vote. There may be Republicans that show up and they may like Loeffler, and they may not like Perdue, and so they'll go in and they'll vote for one way or the other. Yeah, it's. Again, you have to remember that there are nutty things that occur all over this country with the election and with the way people vote. And it may not make any sense. You'd think you'd send the Republicans in, but the Republicans will be, every voter will walk in and say, I didn't like the color tie they were wearing this day, so I'm not voting for them, or, whatever it may have been. And so I don't think that, I think there's a potential of a split. I think that Perdue has a better chance than Loeffler of pulling it off. But Again, I've been wrong in the last election, and I could be wrong here, but I just think that Perdue has a stronger machine. He has more experience, and while he obviously would love to have a junior senator as Republican, it's every man for himself at this point, and in this particular case, woman. And so I think that if he's given a choice between winning and losing with her, winning alone and losing with her, he's going to choose winning alone all day long.
Yeah, he definitely seems like a stronger candidate. Okay, well, the good news is we'll find out soon. Scott Hounsel, because the election's tomorrow. Red State. Scott, appreciate you, man.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Have an awesome day. You too, bro. Coming up next, we'll talk about with Professor Vincent Racaniello from Columbia about the mutant strain of the virus. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I've never received more text or emails saying, what does the professor think about this and this and this than I have the last 2 weeks. So this is long overdue. Professor Vincent Racaniello, he's the professor of virology at Columbia University, and he's the host of the wonderful podcast and videocast called This Week in Virology. You got to check that out, MikeRobe.tv, and follow him on Twitter. He had some wonderful tweets about the first thing I want to ask him. Professor, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. You know, I had this gap on my Monday mornings. I couldn't figure out what was going on.
Like what? I'm supposed to be somewhere, I think. I don't remember where. Well, good. I'm glad we could fill that fill that time for you again. Sir, mutant strains. All right. Now this makes for wonderful headlines. But I remember back to one of our very first conversations. We talked about, you made the comment, if I remember, the virus is changing all the time. It's what it does. So that was my first thought, but where are you on the mutant strain?
Okay. First thing, Mike, I would like you to call it a variant because it's not officially a strain in my book. They're variants. And yes, as coronavirus moves through millions and millions of people, it's always changing. And the question is, does it matter? Does it mean anything? And the short story here is, I don't believe that these changes mean anything yet, or it hasn't been shown. But what happened is, first in the UK and then in South Africa, a variant was noted. You can isolate the virus from people. You do the genome sequence that had a lot of changes in its genome compared to viruses that had been seen previously. 23 different mutations, and we don't know what any of them mean. Nobody's done the experiments yet. But at the same time, both in the UK and Africa, there was quite a large outbreak. And this variant was isolated from the people in this outbreak. And so the scientists in the UK did a little bit of work, and they concluded that there was some chance that this variant may be more transmissible, and that would explain the outbreak, all right? That's a very strong conclusion to make, that the virus is more transmissible. And in my opinion, the data they had didn't support it fully. And many people disagree with me, and many people agree with me. The point is that if you're going to say a virus is more transmissible, you better show the evidence for it. Otherwise, you're going to scare people for no reason. And we still don't have that evidence to this day. But what has happened, and this is the key, this variant now has been detected in many, many different countries, included a number of states in the U.S., Colorado, California, Florida. So we'll see what happens. If the variant suddenly causes big outbreaks, then it looks like it may be associated with increased transmission. But maybe it won't. And that's an experiment that we can't do ourselves, but which, you know, the virus is undergoing on its own. So see, right now, either way, if this variant is more transmissible or not, what would we do? Masking, distancing, reduced numbers, right? All the same things we're supposed to do anyway. And that was one of my arguments initially. You know, we should be masking and all that. And it turns out that in the UK, and I've gotten dozens of emails from listeners in the UK, they say, Professor, people aren't doing lockdown here. We're partying, we're running around in groups, we're doing this and that. So don't blame the variant, just blame us. So that's where I stand. I think people should not worry about it. Just do the usual things you're supposed to be doing.
But it's scary, right? Because in San Diego, where I live, big headlines, right? And they'll say, like, the mutant virus strain has come to San Diego, and everyone's freaking out. Okay, so what, I read the headline, it was 70% more virulent, whatever that means, but that's a high number also and seems scary. What data did they have, and what data would you need to see in order for you to be like, oh, this is something markedly different?
So first, what it is 70% more transmissible. That's what the people in the UK concluded. 50 to 70% more transmissible. They concluded that based on the following two pieces of data. First, they did PCR on nasal washes from patients, and you can get a CT value. Remember, CT values reflect the amount of viral RNA that's present. And they noticed that the CT values were getting lower, or at least lower associated with this variant. And secondly, they would also sequence the genome from these washes, and they said there's more RNA pieces. But as far as I'm concerned, that is not conclusive. You need to measure infectious virus being shed. If you really want to say that this variant grows to higher titers and that's why it's more transmissible, you have to measure infectious virus. PCR or genome sequencing is not enough. And the other thing they did was they measured what we call the R value. Remember that from way beginning of this outbreak, the reproductive number, right? How many people an infected person can infect. And for SARS-CoV-2, we said it's between 2 and 3. Now, they're saying in the UK that went up like 0.2 or 0.3. The problem is things that humans do can affect the R number. So we can bring the R number below 1, and that stops an outbreak by masking and distancing and so forth. On the other hand, we can raise it if we don't behave properly. If we congregate, if we don't wear masks, the R value can go up. So in my view, they haven't proven that those changes actually have to do with the virus. It's like saying, in some countries with a lot of sunlight, the disease is less severe. It's an association between vitamin D and severity, but you have to prove it. This is the same thing. There's an association between this variant and certain epidemiological properties, but you have to prove it before you conclude it.
Makes perfect sense. Can you help me with the definition between variant versus strain? When I said
Sure.
Incorrectly, and I've seen headlines say mutant strain, what's the difference between that and a variant?
So a variant is a virus you would isolate from someone, and it has some mutations in the genome that are different from what you've seen before, right? And in fact, in this outbreak, every person has a different variant because the viruses coming out of every person are different. So that's all a variant is. You don't know what the changes mean. That's why we call it a variant. A strain is a virus with a change that has some different property from the one you've been seeing. And we haven't established that for any of these variants so far in SARS-CoV-2. A lot of people think so, but I would not agree. And my standards are pretty high. I want proof that they're high. And people say, well, Professor, people are dying. You have to take this seriously. And I do take it seriously. You need to mask, you need to distance, all the same things. There's nothing different. But to show that a virus has a different property is very difficult to do. So that's what a strain is.
Is like flu strain, is that an accurate term? Every year is a different flu strain?
Yeah, so from year to year, if a new flu variant arises, which say is not blocked well by the vaccine, sure, that's a new property. That can be a strain, absolutely. But we get evidence for that. We get those viruses and we test them in the lab and we say, oh, they're not blocked by antibodies as well. And here we don't have any such evidence.
Which leads me to the vaccine conversation. So again, I don't know if we want to call it fear-mongering or being prepared for the future, whatever. But what do you think the chances are that the current vaccines one day will not be effective in any potential changes to COVID as the years go on?
And I agree that there's a lot of fear-mongering, because that grabs headlines, it grabs eyeballs, right? But I think that is the most concerning issue, whether the virus would change and evade the vaccine, right? Because here we are, we're vaccinating lots and lots of people, everyone's getting enthusiastic, but if the virus changes, this could be an issue. So far, none of these changes in these variants seem to affect blocking the virus by antibodies, which is not to say that in the future, one virus won't come around that can do that. Flu does that every year, and we're not used to coronaviruses doing that, but anything is possible, right? Even then, though, I'm not too worried because, the mRNA vaccines, we could reformulate those in about 6 weeks and make a new vaccine to accommodate any new variants that arose. So, and the existing vaccines would still provide some level of protection. It wouldn't be like zero. So I'm not too worried about that. And I think we have the ability to turn around really quickly, to pivot and make new vaccines to deal with any new variants that come up.
Really good. Did I hear from, I think I read a New York Times article about the two scientists in Germany, the husband-wife team who created this mRNA vaccine, that they developed it in a weekend? Like they came up with a computer model over the weekend, was that right?
Yeah, well, what happened was in January, the genome sequence of SARS-CoV-2 was published by the lab in China. And so it's pretty easy to download the sequence and say, here's the spike sequence, and just take that and say that's going to be our vaccine. So it would take you all of 30 minutes to do that. And then you can engineer a few changes in it, and that's it.
Whoa.
So it sounds
Amazing.
impressive, but it's pretty straightforward for us to do.
Wow, cool. Okay, more about the vaccine. Can you talk to me about the timing of it? Because it seems like you have to get 2 shots. How much immunity do you get right away after the first shot versus the second shot,
Yeah.
et cetera? What's the timeline of these?
So the question depends. So we have in the U.S. Pfizer and Moderna. They're both mRNA vaccines, right? They're slightly different, the same concept, but the Pfizer vaccine, you have a 4-week wait between the 2 shots, and I think it's slightly less for Moderna, but it's really not all that different. Now, only Pfizer checked immunity after the first vaccination, and you get about 52% protection against COVID after 1 shot, 52% compared to 94% after 2 shots. Moderna didn't do that study, but apparently it's in progress. So you need both shots, and one is not going to work. And I know people now are saying, oh, we should do 1 shot to get more people immunized, but 52% isn't good enough. That's going to leave half of the vaccinated people still susceptible to COVID. So I don't think that's a real option. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, that makes great sense. When you get that, let's just say the first shot, how quickly does it take for even to get to that 52% immunity? Is it a day, 3 days, a week?
I believe they measured it after 2 weeks. Okay, so it's not, I mean, it depends on the person. It could be, say, 7 to 14 days to 21 days, right? It's not immediate.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was reading some stuff about how they did, in this person's opinion, limited testing on people over the age of 75, which I would have thought would have been the primary recipients of the vaccine, right? What do you know about how much testing was done on older Americans?
Yeah, they didn't test as many older people as people in middle and younger ages, right? It's harder to get older people to enroll in vaccine trials. I don't know the numbers offhand, but the Pfizer and Moderna documents have all been published, and they had a good number of older people so that they could conclude that it's safe in them. Otherwise, they wouldn't conclude that, and that it was protective. Now, in Pfizer, I believe most of the vaccine trials enroll 18-year-olds and up, right? And so Pfizer had a few people in the, I believe, 16 to 18-year-old region, and the FDA said, you don't have enough people for us to give an EUA for that group. So see, they were concerned with a too small number of people. They didn't have that issue with the older people. So it was enough to be able to conclude that it's safe for them and it protects them as well.
Okay, and I'm hesitant because I don't want to belabor this point, but I do want I want the truth, and I trust you on this one. And people are asking about this, but the safety of it, the side effects. Bill Gates was asked this the other day, and he didn't give a very comforting answer when it came to side effects. What are you seeing now that we're a couple weeks into this?
So the most clear side effect is an allergic reaction to the shot, right? We've all seen that. The first rollout, the first few days of the vaccine rollout, every allergic reaction was documented. Now the press has backed off on that. And that is something you can manage. That's why when you get the vaccine, they want you to go and sit for 30 minutes right near them where you got the vaccine so that you can be observed, because that's when the allergic reaction is going to happen. And if you have one, then they can control it with an EpiPen or something like that, right? So I'm not too concerned about that. And they say if you've had a reaction to another vaccine previously before you get this, don't take it, right? So that's the only thing I see. Guillain-Barré, paralysis, I don't see any evidence of that happening either now or in the trial, so I'm not too worried about that. I think we're okay at this point. And I think most people who worry about this vaccine, remember, the phase 3 is still ongoing. They're still collecting data. And for most people, it's going to be months before you get the vaccine. It's going to be like February, March. So even by then, we'll even know more about safety. So if you're worried about side effects, what I say to you is just sit tight, because you're not going to get it right now. And by the time you do, we'll probably have a lot more data on that.
Those are most of my most pressing questions. So we'll save some more for next week. But do you have any parting thoughts here that we need to know about?
Yeah. So I think we're at a turning point, right? The cases are starting to peak in most parts of the world, in many parts of the U.S. And, I know a lot of young people who are really upset that they can't have their lives. So we have a 26-year-old son who came home for a few hours over the holidays, and he expressed to me how upset he was that he couldn't have his life. And, before then I said, deal with it. But I understand young people who can't go on with their lives. And to them, I would say, and to everyone, just sit tight. In a few months, we're going to have a lot of people vaccinated, and this is going to come to an end. So right now, the cases are starting to peak, and the vaccine's being rolled out. I wish we could roll it out more. Unfortunately, it's taking a lot longer, but it will come out. I have complete faith that it will come out, and we're going to see an end to this in 2021. It's going to be a better year.
Wonderful. Professor Vincent Racaniello, microbe.tv, watch the podcast, follow him on Twitter, all that. Professor, hopefully we can take another 10 minutes of your time next Monday as well, if you're bored on Monday morning.
Good luck.
Thanks, Professor. Appreciate you. All right, we got one more segment. We'll come back, wrap up. True story, Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I liked the optimistic ending from the professor there, and I think he'll be right. Final thought here. Maybe you had a case of the Mondays today, right? When you take some time off, it's hard to ramp back up into gear. And I don't know what the answer to that is. I think it's gratitude and then finding a purpose in why you work, reminding yourself and why you're doing what you do. And I think those two things together could get you over that hump that is a post-vacation Monday. And if you need gratitude, there's always worse jobs than the one you have. And you can work in the salt mines, for instance. And there's always way worse times to have lived than right now. If you were a man 100 years ago, there's a good chance you'd be dead because the Spanish flu killed you, an actual plague. And then if you weren't killed with that, you were probably conscripted to fight in World War I, and you fought in the trenches charging against machine guns. So you can always find someone who has it better than you and feel bad for yourself. And you can always find someone who has it way worse than you, and you can feel grateful. And that's just a choice. But I want to leave you on this Monday with this thought here. Warren Buffett, he asks this question to people. He says, would you rather be the world's greatest lover, but have everyone think you're the world's worst lover? Or would you rather be the world's worst lover, but have everyone think you're the world's greatest? Okay, that maybe is confusing. He asks it again, but with money, right? Obviously, he's an investing guy. So if no one can see your actual investing results, right? Would you rather be thought of as the world's greatest investor, but you're really the worst? Or would you rather be thought of as the worst when you're actually the best? Interesting question. You can ask that with your friends and family today. But what he's asking is, do you focus on your outer scorecard or your inner scorecard? That's how he puts it. And he says, Buffett says that kids learn from a very young age what their parents put the emphasis on. And if all the parents' emphasis is on what the world is going to think about you, forgetting about how you really behave, then you'll end up with an outer scorecard, always and only caring about what other people think. And Buffett says his dad was 100% an inner scorecard guy. His dad taught him it's how you really behave, it's who you really are that matters the most. Now, if I can take it perhaps to the next level, because some people can come up with a really low bar to meet for their inner scorecard. Like, well, I'm only going to steal $1,000 a week of things from this store, and then you only steal 900 and you're a great person. Right? That's right. So you got to be careful about a really low inner scorecard bar. So I like to look at maybe an eternal scorecard. And the Bible has the answer there. The fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Are you being these things every day? That's not your outer scorecard. It's not even really your inner scorecard. It's your eternal scorecard. Now, Warren Buffett's been talking about this, but Adam Smith in the, what's it called? Moral sentiments of man, or the theory of moral sentiments. The theory of moral sentiments. He said, man desires not only to be loved, that's the external scorecard, but deep down he desires to be lovely. Make sense? He doesn't just want praise, he wants to be praiseworthy. And you know, even if you're praised for something, you know whether or not you're actually praiseworthy. This is a critique on, also, we'll say for another day, the Self-Esteem Movement, which started out in California out of the California state legislature, which makes perfect sense because it's just bunk. But the idea was, if we just tell kids they're wonderful and improve their self-esteem, then they'll actually start acting wonderful. And it's absolutely not true at all. The opposite is true, as we often say on this show. But it turned out that when you tell kids, great job, amazing work, they know if it was actually a great job or not. They know if they actually did great work. They know whether or not what they did and how they're acting is praiseworthy or not. And when you shower them with praise and they know they don't deserve it, it has, if anything, the opposite effect. But that's man's deep desire, is not only to be praised, but to be praiseworthy. And you could talk to tons of celebrities who are praised and praised and praised, but they don't feel it because they know that deep down they're not actually praiseworthy. So of course, we like being graded on an outer scorecard, but what matters most is the inner scorecard. Are my actions worthy of praise? And then whether you get the praise or not doesn't even really matter, right? So to go back to our opening segment, New Year's resolutions, how to keep them. Don't focus on the outcomes. Don't worry about them. And really don't even focus on your process, although that's important. You have to change your identity. What type of person do I want to be? And then prove it to yourself every day. Do it again tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word.